Shalom Aleichem, sweetest friends. This year should be a special schus for every Morish Lidr, Yitzchak Ben Chanel, or for Shlema. The Rif on Daf Tes Amid Aleph, Daf Pei Rif in Maseches Ksubis, proves from the Sugi on Daf Chaf Amid Aleph that Trei, you're not mamid on a chazaka, and therefore, if you have two Kitei Eidim, one says about the other that they're gazlanim, so we're not mamid them on their cheskes kashrus, and because two against two, you're not mamid on a chazaka. And therefore, you don't assume that they're kosher. Because you don't give a person a cheskes kashrus when you have Trei Trei. However, Tosfos writes that Rav Huna, Bava Basra Daf Lamed Aleph Amid Beis, who says that if you have two Kitei Eidim that give contradictory testimonies, that afterwards each one of them can go and testify, even though according to the edus of the other group, they are pasul l'chol eduyot shebetorah, because we're mamid each of them on their cheskes kashrus. So you have one group that gives one testimony, another group that gives another testimony, and later on each group can go independently and testify. Why? Because each of them gets a cheskes kashrus. You're mamid each group on their cheskes kashrus. Now the question is, how is the Rif going to deal with this? How is the Rif going to deal with this Rav Huna? That Rav Huna says that b'shnei kitei eidim they can go independently testify afterwards, and Tosfos explains because you're mamid them in their cheskes kashrus. The Rif learns that Trei, you lose your cheskes kashrus. So here also it's Trei, they should lose their cheskes kashrus. The Ran writes B'das Harif, Tes Amid Aleph B'daf Pei Harif, V'i Tema V'ham Rinan. The Ran writes that Rav Huna is different because the two kitos are not made simultaneously. Each of them comes independently and is made. And since we don't have in front of us the opposite group, we can go each one after their own cheskes kashrus, and we can be told that she is the kas hakshera. Masha Enkein, B'nidon Harif, when we're talking about the kashrus ha'eid, and we're done bivas achas al shtei edios. In other words, what happened in the case of the Rif? That two people said that the other two guys are gazlanim, one of the other two guys is gazlanim. But either way, they want to passel their edus, and now we're done simultaneously because we're done. The second kas is the first kas is gazlanim. There, the cheskes kashrus is not effective against the edim that are passeling. But in the case of Rav Huna, we're dealing with each group independently, because they're not coming at the same time. We're not dealing with the two at the same time. Each of them comes independently. So since we don't have the other group in front of us, we can go after their cheskes kashrus and assume they're the kosher one, and therefore they can testify in the future as well. Mashen came in the case of the Rif, where we're judging the kashrus of the aid, there we're dunning the edios b'vas achas, because we're saying is the first group's aid is kosher, the second group says they're gazlanim. There, the cheskes kashrus is not effective, but l'chora divrei Aran require understanding, because also b'shnei kitei eidim ha'mechishim zeh zeh, even though they're not coming with vas achas in front of us, nevertheless we know that there's edus against them that tells us that they're not kosher, and it's the Safeik psul al yadam. So if you have a Safeik psul, how can we accept their testimony in the future? You have a Safeik psul. Now, la halacha, and that we paskin that shtei kitei eidim achisho zeh zeh, eina mitztarfim zeh im zeh, lahaid edus acheres. In other words, if you have two groups of witnesses and they contradict each other, they cannot afterwards combine to be made a different edus. Rather, each one can go independently as their own group and be made. So the Shach brings the famous discussion of the Chachmei Brisk, Behakchashas Eid Echad, In other words, Eid Echad is made a certain way, and another Eid is made lehefich. Are they mitzdarei fiyachad b'makom acher? Can they afterwards combine and testify? Reuven says one with testimony. Shimon says another. Can afterwards Reuven and Shimon be Eidim together in light of the fact that here they contradicted each other, so maybe each one's a shakran. Each one is suspected of being a shakran. Or maybe no. Maybe we keep each of them in their cheskes kashrus. And we say that they can testify together later, even though 2 and 2. They can't, if it's 2 against 2, they can't testify together, meaning the two groups can't intermingle, but they can only do independently, but they can't intermingle, because then you have a chakran in the group. So the Shach asks, brings from the Chachmei Brisk, what's one-on-one? We say the same thing, that they can't testify together afterwards. The Tumim brought in the Nesivis. Safeik Aleph asks from the Gemara in Shavuos, that we ask on Rav Chizda, who passels each group from testifying later, because Ba'adei Asadei Shakrei Lamali, how can I be with these false witnesses? So he asks, from that Eid Echad says if it's high, they're testifying about where exactly the moon was found, and there's a big discrepancy. One says it was 3 mirdos, 3 horse, what you ride on the horse, high, and the other one says 5, just describing a height. So you have 3 versus 5, so we do some betela. Their edus is batal because it's too large a discrepancy. But afterwards, each guy can go with someone else and be made edus acheres. So we're asking a kasha on Rav Chizda. Chizda, how can you say that each group is now puzzle from testifying in the future? If we have 1 against 1, each guy is considered kosher in the future. So we see that we shteltzu between 2 and 1. Gamba hakosha seid echad, we assume according to Rav Chizda they're puzzle in the future. So now we can be mashlich, we can project from that on to Rav Huna, and say that we can also compare 1 and 2. That just like Rav Huna says, that 2 can testify independently, but they can't intermingle, the 2 groups can't intermingle. So too, 1 and 1, they can't intermingle. So from the Gemara's kasha on Rav Chizda, we can learn about Rav Huna, that you can compare 2 to 1. And just like in 2 they can't intermingle afterwards, so too 1. So what Bechlal is the Safeik of the Chachmei Brisk? We have an open Gemara that seems to support the fact that 1 and 1 cannot combine afterwards. Ube'emes, we have to understand the etzem hasvara that behakroshas eid echad, they could be made afterwards together. What's the difference if 2 are made, that they can't, 2 against 2, that they can't intermingle afterwards? How can 1 and 1 intermingle? What would be the difference? If 1 contradicts 1, how can you say that afterwards they can go together? It should be pasal misafik. So Hagon Agadol, Beryl Schwartzman, Zechat Tzadik Levracha, Ryan Cutler's son-in-law. So in his Sefer of Shiurim, Shiurei Hagon of Dov Schwartzman and Meseches Ksubis, in Simon Chavches, says as follows. That first we have to understand the Ikar Machlokas of Rav Huna and Rav Chizda and Bava Basra. That according to Rav Chizda, Shtei Ki Te'edim HaMechisho Zu, Psula Kol Kas Gam Lahaid B'fnei Atzma Idus Acheres. Each group cannot testify afterwards independently. Because we say, Bahadei Sadei Shakrei Lamali. What am I doing with these false witnesses? Meaning we know one of them is a false witness, so we can't let them testify afterwards. Rav Huna Rav Huna argues, and he says they can. So, what's Pshat in the Machlokas? The Rashbam, Dibra Mask Rav Chizda Omer, explains that the reason Rav Chizda is that we're Mamid, Memoina, B'cheskes Merei. Explains Rabbeinu Gershon, Mora Goyla there, that according to Rav Chizda, the Eidim are Safeik Psulim, because Mimanav Shach, 1 Kas is Vadai Psula, and we cannot be Mamid them B'cheskes Kashrusam. So then we have to understand what the reason of Rav Huna is, who argues and holds that each of them is kosher l'haid b'fnei atzma, and we don't passel them misafik. One of them is pasel misafik, so one of them is vadei pasel. So how can we later on allow them to testify? We have a 50-50 chance there's a bad group here. So it would appear that according to Rav Huna, he holds that if you have two Kitei Eidim, since each kas is not made on the other group to passel them, because they're not saying that the first group was made b'sheker, because they didn't hear the Eidus of the first group at all. Rather, each kas is made Eidus shel atzma, that's kach v'kach hayamaisa. So it emerges then that we have two Eidiyososos, but they're not being made yeshirot ala kata rishona. And if so, each kas is ksher l'hayd b'fnei atzma, because there's no din paslus on the Eidim, because Eidim were not made to passel them, and the etzem astira doesn't bother us, like the famous svar of the Nesivos Hamishpat, Lamed Aleph Sif Katan Aleph, Fidarko, that each one said bididami. They thought they were just making a mistake, but we can't mamish go ahead and passel them, because each group said what they thought, and there's a contradiction beseder, but they weren't necessarily lying. But to be made together, they can't be made, because we can't be makabel their edus, because they were miskabel bevezdin kehagado sosos, and we have against each group a kas that's passeling them. So the reason that they can't intermingle afterwards is because sof kol sof, they each have another pair that's saying that they're Eidei Sheker. So you know that in this group there's an Eid Sheker. So the yesod is that when you have two groups and each group is not being made on the other group, each group is independently saying their own etus. They're not passing the other group. So since they're not passing the other group, we're mamid each one in their cheskes kashrus, and they can go and testify later, maybe like the Svar of the Nesivos, that each one said b'didami. They thought that's what they saw. But when it comes to intermingling the two groups, that's already, you could still argue, maybe it's b'didami, and they're still kosher. But that far we don't go. When they're intermingling the groups, when you're looking at each group independently, and it could very well be that they're both kosher, because they were in the group that only one of the two groups is kosher. So since one of the two groups is kosher, assume that he came from the kosher group, and keep his cheskes kashrus. But when two groups are contradicting each other, and now afterwards one guy from one group wants to come, one guy from another group wants to come, that's already a little bit too much, because you don't have now the assumption that one of them came from the kosher group. You know one of them came from the pasuk group. So it could be that this group now that you're looking at them independently is the kosher group. So then assume that they're kosher, and even if there's another testimony, so assume that it was bididami. They thought and they made a mistake. But if there are two people from two separate groups, and these groups are contradicting each other, and now they're combining and testifying, so you have to say two things now. You have to say not only bididami, but that you have to, in other words, you have to come on to bidami. You don't just have, beforehand we also had that maybe this guy was in the kosher group. Maybe he's really giving the right testimony. So since this person was giving these two people were giving the correct testimony, so go with their testimony. In the future also, because in the past they didn't lie either. But here you know you had a guy who gave incorrect testimony in the future, because now they're intermingling from the two groups. And now the only explanation you have is bididami. You don't have that explanation that maybe they came from the kosher group. So the group that told the correct testimony, the group that was accurate. So that far we're not going to go. We're not going to be somech legamrei on bididami, but we'll be somech on bididami if we can already assume that he came from the kosher group, and then we say that even the accurate group, and even if he didn't come from the accurate group, maybe he was just bididami. But if you know that one of these people came from the inaccurate group, you can't do it, and therefore you can't combine the testimonies of people from the two different groups that contradict each other. But again, if they're from two separate groups and they're coming later on to testify independently, each group by itself, there you could accept it, again, because of the svara that the other group didn't come straight away to passel them. The other group didn't come straight away to passel them. They just gave a different testimony. So since they didn't come straight away to passel them, we keep them with their cheskas kashrus. Mashenkein, even though they didn't come to passel them directly, but if there's 2 against 2 and to intermingle them afterwards, 1 from each group, that we don't do. But if it's 2 and 2, so you have a salad, maybe this was the group that was accurate, and even if it wasn't, maybe it was with the dummy, and they weren't directly hit with the other group didn't directly contradict them as people, as Eidim, they just independently gave a different version of the events, so you can be machshir their Eidus in the future. That's the Svar of Rav Huna, L'fi Havanasi. So according to that, we understand beautifully the Svar of the Ran, who is mechalik between the case of the Rif and that of Rav Huna, that every group can come independently and testify. What did the Ran say? The Ran said that if you have Shnei Kitei Eidim and one group says about the other that they're Gazlanim, we're not Mamid b'Cheskas Kashrus. And we ask, what about Rav Huna? Rav Huna is Mamid in the future in Cheskas Kashrus. So even though Rav Huna has 2 different Eidim on 2 sides, you still go after the Cheskas Kashrus of each group, because the Ran holds that Dafka B'ni don't have Rif, that Bevas Achas they're soiser each other. Here it's a direct hit. B'kiyah Yishira B'matara. Here, the one group is saying about the other, they're Gazlanim. So you can't go after the Cheskas Kashrus, there's not a Gazlan. Because you have Eidus of Beis Eidim, Shemidim all over the postlo, they're saying this guy's a Gazlan in the other group. So that's a direct hit. There, you don't keep his Cheskas Kashrus. Mashenke B'shnei Kitei Eidim, HaMachish Zu of Rav Huna, that we don't have an Eidus on them to passel them. There, we're Mamid Kol Kas B'fnei Atzma B'Cheskas Kashrus. U'lefizeh, Be'akchoshas Eid Echod, we don't have Hagodas Eidus of 2 Eidim to passel one of them. There we can say that later on they can combine the 2 of them, even though they gave contradictory testimonies. The Safeik of the Chachmei Brisk. Umemela, it's not shver from the Gemara in Shavuos. And you can't bring a raya from Rav Chisda to Rav Huna. Because they know chinami. According to Rav Chisda, who holds that we say de be'edem mukchashim, behadei sadei shakri. Lamali, what do I need these false witnesses for? Either Safeik psulim, and they're even Safeik the psulim, and later on they can't testify independently. Why? Because according to Rav Chisda, one group is definitely puzzle. So Mela, one group is definitely puzzle. And since one group is definitely puzzle, later on, we can't be makabel the Reidus Misafik. Because he holds that Eidim Mukhashim, you say, Bahadei Sadi Shakri Lamali. Rav Chisda doesn't subscribe to this theory that if they're not making a direct hit, you can be mamid them in their Cheskas Kashrus. He says, no, they're giving 2 contradictory testimonies, in the future they're out. So if Ibazai, the same logic, the same logical concept would apply 1 against 1. There's no chilik between Akhoshes Shnei Eidim and Akhoshes Eid Echad. Kol Shei Safeik Psul, Ein on a Makabla may do so. If there's a Safeik Psul, we can't accept the Eidus. So 1 against 1, each guy is a Safeik Psul. It's even worse. Now you know, if they combine together afterwards, that one of them is the liar. If it's 2 and 2, it's sad to say maybe it was the kosher group. But Rav Chisda holds, no, 2 and 2 is no good, because you have a Safeik Psul. So 1 against 1 is also good Safeik Psul, even though it's not a direct hit, just 2 contradictory testimonies. That's enough to invalidate the one. So therefore the Gemara's whole mahalach was only the fear of Chisda to compare 1 to 2. Mashen came to Rav Huna that he goes Basar din pasul shalem, that you have to passel them. So the Chachmei Brisk held that that's dafka be'akhosha shnei edim. If you have 2 people against them saying that their testimony is not correct, because they're giving a different testimony, there, if it's two, so we're going to passel them. That's why he holds afterwards, you can't intermingle. We're talking about intermingling. If it's two, even though it's not a direct hit, but just the fact that two people are being made, that's already a proper edus on the other two against their testimony, because they're giving contradictory testimonies. And now if afterwards they combine from each group, what's going to happen is that you have one guy in the invalid group here. You have one guy who gave inaccurate testimony. So Rav Huna, if it's just a Safeik psul, so Rav Huna is not bothered by that. When is Rav Huna bothered? Rav Huna says you can't accept the edus if it's a direct attack on their kashrus. Then you can't accept the edus. And even if it's not a direct attack on their kashrus, but if you have two groups and they give contradictory testimony, and then afterwards one combines with one from the other group, so here you know that you have one of the guys from the inaccurate group. How do you know? Because if you have two Eidim testifying about them, the fact that two Eidim testify about them passels them. But one Eid testifying about him, that doesn't passel him. So yes, we know that if it's one and one, they're giving contradictory testimonies after they combine, one of them is giving the inaccurate testimony. But that's we only know it's inaccurate based on one other person. That's not enough to passel the Eidim. Rav Huna is set on passeling the Eidim. So the only way the Eidim are going to be passel is if you have two against them. So there Rav Huna says if you have two people against two, and then afterwards they combine one and one, so we say, sorry, you have two people who said that you're a liar, that you gave inaccurate testimony. And you know that in this group, there's one person who have two people against them. So if you know in this group, there's one person who has two people against them, that passes him. So what passes him? A direct hit, saying that he's passel, or two people giving contradictory testimony, that'll passel him. If he's combining again, and we know that in this group there's one person from the group that gave the false testimony. But if it's only one person, since he wasn't mukhash al yidei shnei edim, they're not passel at all. Afilu lo seidus. There's only one guy passeling them. So therefore, this Gemara is not a raya against Rav Huna. Who's it a raya for? For Rav Chizda. Rav Chizda compares 2 and 1 because Rav Chizda says Safeik psul out. So in 2 against 2 you have a Safeik psul. 1 against 1 you have a Safeik psul. So throw it out of court. But if it's according to Rav Huna, he doesn't passel Safeik psuls because he holds 2 against 2. It's a Safeik later on, but still machshir. So 1 against 1 also. If it's Safeik later on, they want to combine. You're right, it's a Safeik psul, but we're still machshir. So he's not bothered by Safeik. He only says that the edus isn't good if either it's direct hit on them, that they're considered pasel, or you have 2 edim against them, saying that they giving contradictory testimony. So that is what's going to pasel. They're not 1 against 1. Now, Liba de Emes, the Shach proved Kedas Sovrim Lahefech. He didn't accept the ruling of the Chachmei Brisk. And he holds that even Akhoshes Eid Echod, Enim Yocholim Litztarif Yachad Lahayid Eidus Achas, they can't combine afterwards to be made in Eidus. Even though you don't have 2 against either of them. So it would appear that, according to this opinion, the biur b'svaris Rav Huna is that Eidim HaMukhashim are not mitzaref afterwards. Lahai, they're not allowed to intermingle afterwards, the two groups. It's not because there's Eidus to passel them, because the second group is not testifying about them. Since the second group isn't testifying about them, there's no din paslus at all. Rather, Rav Huna holds that since in front of the Beis Din you have two Edu Yososros, Mimanav Shach, you can't combine them afterwards to Paskin Al PM. So if afterwards they get together from the two groups and they want to testify together, it won't work because they already in the past gave conflicting testimonies. So you know that one of these fellas was from the false group. Mimanav Shach was from the false group. That's enough for us. And if that's the case, no chiluk between 1 and 2. One also, if it's 1 against 1, you know afterwards one of them was from the false group because they gave conflicting testimonies. So, if you hold like the sheet of the Chachmei Brisk, you need 2 witnesses to passel. In other words, when you have 2 against 2, afterwards they can't intermingle. Why? Because that's considered that they have 2 people against them. Now consider, it really is they have 2 people against them. They have 2 people against them. And since they have 2 people against them, that passels them. That's enough to passel them. 2 people against them, and now they're intermingling. So if it was just 2 people against them, you're mamid them and their cheskes kashrus. Or you said, where's bididami? But now that they're intermingling, and you have 2 people who earlier said that they gave incorrect testimony, that's already going too far. That we can't accept. And that's all Chachmei Brisk. Because the Chachmei Brisk held that if you have 2 against 2, then in that Eidus that they're giving, there are 2 people who said that they're saying not correctly. So we're going to be mamid them in the future on their cheskes kashrus. But for that Eidus, if they want to combine afterwards with the guy from the other group, we're going to say, no. I'm sorry, but you guys, one of you guys gave earlier a conflicting testimony, and you had 2 people who said that you gave that your testimony was wrong. So that we can combine. But according to the Shach, but that only applies if there's 2 but not 1. But according to the Shach, the problem is not that 2 people passed their earlier Eidus and said differently than them, but that Mimanav Shach, you had somebody who earlier on gave an inaccurate testimony. And therefore would apply even 1 against 1. So these are just some Hirurim. There's obviously a lot more to say, and I'm not 100% sure that I understood I think I understood it correctly. But Tamid Yesh Ma'alad and Yesh Ma'alahosif, very, very broad sugya. So I gave people food for thought. So even if you argue, that's also Torah. Everything is Torah. As long as you're learning, you're learning. So we should be Zoche Lilmod Ulamed Lishma Velasos. Well, the kaim is called Divrei Salmo Tarasu B'Ahava. And B'Siyata Dishmaya, we were Zoche to understand the Das of the Ran, who made a distinction between the Rif, who says that when Eidim passel each other, one group says about the other Gazlan, and we're not Mamin and Cheskes Kashrus. When they come independently, we are Mamin and their Cheskes Kashrus because they're coming independently. It's not a direct hit on the other group. They're each coming separately. They're each giving independent testimony. And they're not related to the other group. They're not coming to court and saying, no, what they said is incorrect. We're going to say differently. That'd be a different story. But no, they're just coming, giving their own testimonies. There we can be Ma'amad HaCheskes Kashrus. When they make a direct hit and they two of them say, no, he's a gazlan, they're passing the gavra, that already we don't accept. We're not mamad cheskes kashrus, and we should be zocher mitzvah Shem. Lachzor v'lishnos perik zev sugya zu, one of the most kishmak sugyas. I don't know what sugya is not kishmak, but tamid b'simcha v'tuv levav meirov kol. Amen v'amen. Shalom, shalom, sweetest and most beloved friends.